It's okay. That's very important what you just said. So let's go then to the second part of the map. So here we are in 1947 going to 1948. So what happened then is that the United Nations, so at some point the British colonial forces, okay, we give up, we can't figure out what will happen here because there was already violence in the land. And then the United States comes up with a partition plan and says there's going to be two states, the Israeli state and an Arab state for the Arab population, which would be what we see there with green as the Palestinian land. So notice, of course, that this is a plan which already Israel is smaller than it would hope, because at some point years earlier, it was promised an even bigger part that would include what today would call Jordan. But Israel says, even with this relatively small piece of land, again, most in the south is desert, Israel says, we are okay. So what is very important here is to notice that there would have been a Palestinian state if the Arabs at that point said, okay, we get this deal. How did the Arabs react? They reacted by declaring war to Israel, literally the day Israel declared its independence, which was the day that officially the British mandate on the area expired. So, Elan, any comments on the UN partition plan? Is there anything of interest here?
Yeah, notice how this map now is about sovereignty of nation states versus population distribution. So this is a very different kind of map. Colors are the same. That's something you should notice if you're trying to evaluate this map as a tool for thinking. Why is there no signal that that's the change? Okay, so now the other thing about this is it's at least honest up to this point. This is a plan. This never came to fruition for the reason that you mentioned. Immediately a war erupted within this area, and then shortly afterwards, foreign nations neighboring invaded with the goal not to impose the UN plan and rescue it, but the opposite, to completely overturn the idea of the UN plan, whatever its merits. And you could debate the merits of this UN plan. It wasn't the first plan for partition, but it was the one that went into effect under the vote. Those foreign nations that came in were not, and this is important, were not there to make sure that the population of Arab and Palestinians, and we have to talk about what that means, that population was not their concern. Their concern was to take over this territory and make it either part of Syria, part of Egypt, part of Jordan, part of, I mean, even the Iraqis sent people and the Saudis sent people to fight in this contest. So in this conflict. So there was really an attempt to grab the land. And if you were thinking about, if you were really concerned about the idea of a Palestinian state and what happens after 47 and why didn't it come to fruition, the point you raised about it being rejected is important. The second point that's important is the fact that the supposed champions of this idea were not interested in it, and they came in and made it worse, and whatever Palestinians there were who wanted a state that would have been part of this UN deal, they were prevented from pursuing that because of the invasion of those foreign powers. And then the final point I would raise here is there's a deeper philosophic issue over and above the history and the politics, and that one again is part of the context that's dropped and deliberately dropped and evaded. And that is, yes, the UN voted for a partition, and you can cling to that if you're on the side of the Israelis and say, look, we were on the right side of this decision, and you can point fingers and say the Palestinians were not, and so forth. And that's fine. But the deeper question is, should there have been any partition? Should there have been any state for Israel and any state for the Palestinians and the Arabs in the area? And that's the philosophic question. And I actually think the Israelis deserve to have a state because they were moving in the direction of a state that did and does now enable people to live in freedom and prosper and build and produce. Whereas what I think would have been expected of the Palestinian state is the opposite. It's what you see in all the neighboring regimes, which is they're authoritarian monarchies or theocracies, and not at all conducive to human life. we don't know what that would have looked like. Oh, actually, we do know, because the history, as we'll see, does point to what the Palestinian state looks like. But that's an important issue. What are the conditions? What are the moral premises that make your claim to statehood valid or invalid? And that's just completely ignored here. So we start with map 1, where everything is Palestine except for this white growth, which is Jewish settlements. Then the white growth increases and the Palestinian decreases, and it's shrinking. And oh no, how could this possibly be the right way this should be going? This is a problem. No, the real question here is, what are the conditions that human beings need in order to live in a society? What is a good society? What is a just society? That's the principle that should govern who is entitled to a claim to statehood, and for what kind of state. And that is completely ignored. And it's important for people looking at this map to ask themselves, why is that question not being put on the table? Why is it being pushed out of the way so that I'm led to think that the Palestinians are being victimized by this white growth on the map labeled Israel? That's an important question anyone who's touting this map should be answering.
And Elan, just to clarify something, because there might be people out there with bad faith and they will say, so what you're actually saying is that you would know already from 1947 that the Arabs in the area would not be able to create a state that will do what is the function of a state, what should be the function of a state, which is to support the rights of its citizens. And the answer is, yes, we knew it already then, and it has nothing to do with any ethnic origins. It had to do with their ideas. It had to do with their ideologies. All the surrounding states, all the Arab leaders, actually the goal was to throw the Jews to the sea. And that's not an exaggeration. That was an actually recorded and an actually the official goal. So why do at least I claim that it's questionable whether the Arabs should have taken a state, and you say maybe they shouldn't, is because of what they were up to already. So it has nothing to do with the fact that they are Arabs or the others are Jews. The question is, the government that you're about to install there, will it function in the way a government should function? And I think this is something very original that we bring to the table, that objectivists bring to the table, that this is not about ethnicities. Or who was there 2,000 years ago? Why did the Jews have a state and the Arabs have not a state? The question is, what type of government are you going to install there? Anyway, let us go to the third map. So what happens actually, as we said, is